Hoxie with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how interest rates and inflation are viewed in the globalist world. So prior to globalization, inflation was inflation, and interest rates were a way of curbing inflation, and if this was inflation across the board. So there'd be a basket of, if you like, goods, like stuff you'd buy in the grocery store, food items. There'd be cost of electricity, cost of rent, and all these sort of things. And that'd be looked at in an overall basket. And inflation is running at X percent. It would be declared, and interest rates would be jacked up in the event the inflation was running too high. Now, there was a major sort of rethink once the globalists started taking over, and they gradually achieved an almost complete redefinition of inflation. So inflation that are price increases are not really regarded as inflation. They kind of are, but only to a little bit. It's well watered down because price increases lead to profits, higher profits, and then that's a good thing. But if inflation is of wages or of cost inputs, of which wages is a big thing, if there's increases in that, then it is regarded as inflationary and dangerous inflationary. So they've got these two different sort of distinctions between inflation. So rents could be doubling or tripling or quadrupling. Well, that's not really too bad, like people can adjust around that. Yeah, okay. But if there's wage increases, inflation in wages, whoa, what a fucking calamity. We got to do something. We got to do interest rates. We got to, take them out back and shoot them. And so that's viewed as a major thing. We got to import millions of illiterate peasants here. We got to fucking do shit. It's urgent. Panic. But anything else is not a panic. The consumer can just adjust around it. Who gives a shit about them? And so these are the different ways of looking at it. Now, also with regard to inflation, say in food prices or rents or something like that, which people have got to have somewhere to live and they need to eat. So these are things that are unavoidable. Now, in the case of food, say food inflation, I've used this a number of times before. I'll use it again. Say the price of chicken or beef or something goes up. Then the way they measure the inflationary effect of that now is to say, well, if the price of beef goes up, people will simply switch their consumer choices to chicken. So really, the price of beef going up, it could have gone up 100 times. That's not really inflationary because people just won't pay that price. They'll buy something else instead. So we can still say the inflation is zero. Okay, so price of beef, doubles on month one. On month two, the price of, say, chicken doubles. But they still use the same formulas. Well, because it doubled, that just means people go and buy something else. And the month after that, price of lamb doubles, lamb chops, price of pork doubles after that. So in fact, all the different cuts of meat have all doubled in price over 4 months. But they can still argue it's non-inflationary because they'll say, well, people will change their consumer choices. The same, interestingly, goes for, say, rents or mortgages or something like that. With rents, they'll say, okay, well, rents might have doubled, but what that means is more people will then share the rent. So instead of someone renting a place sort of on their own or a couple renting, they'll bring in a renter, like someone to rent a room or something, and that will actually reduce the cost of rent to a situation where it's really non-inflationary. So they can make that argument there. Now, there can be a quality of life argument. You've got a 2-bedroom apartment and you've got a husband or wife or somebody living in there and they think, holy fuck, the rents have doubled. We'll have to rent out that other room now and get in a tenant so that we can reduce our rent that we have to pay. So, that's not an impossible consideration, but you get a quality of life reduction there. Also, they'll say, well, children will then move out of their rented place and go back, move in with their folks. So really, rent can increase by 50% or 100%. It doesn't matter because it's really, we say it's not. We assert that it's not inflationary. This, of course, is utter and total nonsense. But that's the sort of mathematics they use. Now, a few months ago, when they were talking about hiking interest rates, and this was all across the Western world simultaneously, so it was globalist, orchestrated, and coordinated. But they were saying that inflation was getting out of control. Now, they were rather vague about it, but the main sources of inflation were all globalist, forced on us by the globalists. So mass migration was forcing up rents, as were big buying up of rental properties by the likes of the BlackRocks, and they were squeezing it for maximum profits and so on. So rents were going out of control there, particularly city rents. It's not so bad when you get further out from the city, but again, you need to be an hour and a half, say an hour and a half train ride from, say, downtown Sydney before the rents moderate. They're still high by historical standards, but they're nowhere near as hysterical as they are in, say, the downtown areas. But then you've got if you're, say, commuting, you're renting further out, you're commuting, then you've got quite a high cost of traveling, which, when you look at it, you could probably pay another $100 a week in rent to just money you're burning on, say, traveling costs, for example. So just having a look at it. So rents are out of control. Energy prices are just hysterical. And the energy prices are now running at sort of about 40%, 50% ahead of inflation. So clearly, energy prices are expensive. And if you include a combination of electricity and gas and so on, there, you're looking at pushing now 100% ahead of wage increases, which is the idea of how expensive energy is now, adding in petrol and so on. So there's the energy cost and there's food costs. Now I sort of do, most of the shop, not all, but most of the shopping, and this is like the grocery shopping. And so I've got a pretty sharp eye for the food prices and so on. And I've got the view that we're getting horribly screwed by globalist machinations. So in terms of the prices we have to pay. So I've sort of looked at all sorts of methodologies on the basis of, is it possible to reduce your grocery bill to the pre-COVID type inflationary levels, and what strategies are needed to do that. So I've looked at that, and I've got spreadsheets. That sounds a bit anal, I know, but I've got spreadsheets up for the cycles that items are on special for. The markdowns or the super hot specials. For example, there was a hot special, well, here's one that's still on now, for a certain type of mayonnaise that we both like. It's like a salad dressing type mayonnaise we both like. And with summer not that far away, we used probably a dozen of those containers over the Christmas, New Year, summer sort of period, and they're on like better than half price at the moment. So I'll buy in bulk, and then that's that at the way. And that, so I'm constantly looking at those sort of things. But price inflation, every day I'm looking at things that where the price is going, and they're very much, the price increases are very much being built around the state, things you can't really do without, like the bread, the milk, even the entry level cuts of meat and those sorts of things. There, the price rises have been quite substantial. Now, they've started a range of price reductions recently, but they're in things like exotic vinaigrettes and so on that went up from $7 to $10 and are now dropping it to $9.50 a bottle or something like that. But you don't need the exotic vinaigrettes, or $20 a bottle. There was one, it was a cheese. It's over $100 a kilo. This cheese, $50 a pound thereabouts, and they've dropped the price of that by a couple of bucks. But that was always a very discretionary item. Not many people are prepared to spend $50+ on fucking cheese. So I mean, they're out there, and I do sometimes, but it's not a staple. I don't have to have it. It is an absolute discretionary item. Whereas things like bread and milk and rice and that sort of stuff. So I mean, just rice alone, the price of rice has gone up very substantially, again by about 50% or so. So all these prices have gone up, but then that was the globalist scam around COVID. And the multinational firms, in particular, the multinational firms are just increasing prices by very substantial amounts, 25, 30, 40%, 15%, and then 6 months later, another 20% and the like. Now, sure, they're protecting their profits and their margins. I get all that. But they're obviously well ahead of the cost curve because wages haven't gone up. And if you look at the component increase in the cost of, say, petrol as a case in point, or energy, you look at that as a factor of total production, and you look at the price increases, then the price increases are far, far beyond the production cost increases. So there's a lot of profiteering going on there. And all these big multinational companies are all very much globalist disciples and on the globalist, flunky stooge bandwagon. So when you go across, and of course petroleum, and you go across the spectrum of what was causing inflation, and all of it was globalist orchestrated: the mass migration, the green agenda pushing up energy prices, the COVID and the like, pushing up the food prices, and the list went on. None of the inflationary pressures were organic. None of them. Now, because these cost pressures were forcing up the cost of living, this in turn was putting pressure on wage increases, and that's why the international banks and so on hit the panic button. Wage inflation is something they're terrified of. Any other inflation is fine. Now, so the interest rates went up, and I've no doubt it dampened at least the consumer side of the economy. People going shopping to buy discretionary goods, things like that. I think that would have already pulled back anyway because of the cost of living increases. You've got a choice of, do you buy another, upgrade your flat screen TV, or do you pay the rent or something? And you're going to pay the rent. Leave the TV until another time. Easy credit was putting people in a situation where they could just pick up the TV and for 3 months they didn't have to pay anything. And some of the more simple people, I'm aware, friends of ours, their children go out on these huge spending sprees, getting this easy credit, no money down, take the item today, and then the bills start to come in, and they find themselves in incredible financial difficulties. And I'm surprised how many younger people actually get caught up in that. And they seem to be quite bewildered. Like, oh, how did it happen? I don't know how it happened. Anyway, so that's it. So the causes of inflation, as it were all globalist orchestrated. Nothing was organic about it. So it's a bit rich for the central banks to then hike up interest rates when that isn't going to have any effect on the globalist price increases anyway. So, and this has actually come to pass. Now, if I go, the interest rate increases have gone up for quite some time now, several months, and multiple increases. So then I look at again, these main causes of inflation. So let's have a look at, let's say, auction clearing rates. This is residential real estate auction clearance rates. They're more or less the same as they were before. Now they're saying, well, the real estate market's getting overheated. We've got to put up interest rates to slow it down. Well, it hasn't slowed it down at all. Far from it. Now, again, the clearance rates are between 75 and 85% every weekend. This is traditionally a slightly slower time of the year, but it picks up pretty swiftly after here. So there's no slowing down in the real estate at all. So if the intention was to slow it down, but why is that? Interest rates are much higher. Wouldn't that be stopping people from buying? Well, that assumes that it's mums and dads and so on that are buying the places. It's not. It's offshore international institutional investors. And if it's not Communist Party generals from China or rich Brahmins out of India that are buying up the real estate, it's the BlackRocks or the institutional investors. There's no local people buying it. Now, just to test that theory, because I was pretty sure that's how it was, I went to some auctions not far from where I live, and looked at who was turning up for the auctions, and who was buying it, and the first one or two bids have got some the mums and dads have got their 9-to-5 job, but everyone else was an institutional investor of some sort, and the majority were acting on behalf of offshore overseas investors. And they were the one. And they're not constrained by interest rates or anything. They're in it for money laundering. They're getting the investment funds offshore. They're just plain money laundering and consortiums and so on. So there's no organic effect here that the interest rate increases are having. The interest rate increases would dampen down the ability of the local mums and dads to buy property. Sure it would have to have. But those aren't the people who are buying property anymore. They haven't been for years in Australia. They're again the offshore investors and the money launderers and the big financial firms. They're the ones who are buying the fucking real estate. And until that stopped, and it needs to be stopped, there's no chance that real estate prices will come back to anything even resembling the purchasing power of the local families and local mums and dads. As the interest rate increases, then the big multinational firms simply further increase their food prices and their grocery prices. So that's not stopping anything at all. It's slowing down consumers from buying things, perhaps. But again, because they're mostly monopolies, oligopolies, and cartels now, again, encouraged and permitted and condoned by and blessed by the globalists, because they're not really facing a competitive situation, these firms, and they're operating in cartel conditions anyway, they can simply increase their price. So if their sales drop, and thus that affects their overall dollars of profit coming in the door, they can just do if you like the actuarial calculations to say, all right, well, sales will drop by 10%, so we'll just increase the prices by 9%, which will give us the same profit yield off a lower sales base. So that actually adds to inflation. The price of petrol, is again, gasoline is again very high. Some of this is to do with the exchange rates and things like that of the Australian dollar to say the US dollar and whatnot. But the overall situation here is that all of the causes of inflation, what was causing inflation previously that had the central banks supposedly concerned and worried, they're all still there. Rents are still increasing. They've dampened down a little bit when you get an hour and a half, 2 hours out of travel time out of say the cities, but in the downtown areas, because mass migration has been ramped up again, the rents in the inner city and middle distance city areas are madly out of control, and increasing again far beyond wage pressure. So the reality here is everything that was causing inflation is still active. It's still going. And none of these interest rate rises did anything to dampen those things down. So I would argue that the interest rate is just to squeeze, and for nothing else other than to squeeze the local citizenry, and to actually do nothing to really dampen down inflation. If they wanted to dampen down inflation, they would cut the mass migration, very important there, because it's causing huge problems in the real estate market, and any offshore buying or nominees buying on behalf of offshore, they should stop that. And Western governments should stop that immediately. And then the price of real estate and the price of rents will come down quite sharply. And even if it's managed down over a period of years, that's still preferable. And that would take pressure off people wanting higher wages. But all the pressure for people needing higher wages, the cost of living increases, again, is all orchestrated by the globalists. You've been a task today, your Pushback Channel, and thank you for listening.